Emma stepped into the luxury store on a chilly afternoon in central London. The bright lights inside made the polished floors gleam, and the elegant displays of high-end items lined the walls. She looked around, her eyes scanning the store, but she did not seem out of place. Her coat was simple, dark blue, not designer, and her shoes were modest. But the way she carried herself, confident, calm, unshaken, made her stand out. She was there with purpose, and it was clear that nothing would distract her from her goal. She was not just any shopper. Emma was a business manager and personal stylist to a famous singer, someone whose name was known across the globe. That's why she was there, to find a special handbag for an upcoming campaign. The singer, her client, was all about representing power, elegance, and strength in her work. And today she had sent Emma to select the perfect item to reflect that vision. As Emma walked through the store, the manager, Helen, took notice of her. Helen had been working in that boutique for years. She was used to dealing with the wealthiest customers and the most high-profile clients. But there was something about Emma that made her pause. She looked at Emma up and down with a slight frown, not in anger but in judgment. The moment Emma stepped forward to approach the display case, Helen appeared beside her. "May I help you?" she asked, but her tone was different. Cold, almost distant. It wasn't a greeting, it felt more like a question of whether Emma truly belonged there. Emma didn't flinch. She had dealt with people like Helen before. She smiled warmly, trying to ease the distance, though she could feel the tension in the air. "Yes, I'd like to see the limited collection handbag, please." Helen hesitated. She looked Emma up and down again, as if considering whether she should allow this simple request. "Those are very expensive," she said slowly. "Perhaps something more suitable?" Emma felt the weight of those words. Something more suitable. The words echoed in her mind. She had heard that kind of tone before, had experienced it in other places, other stores. It was a subtle way of saying, "You don't belong here." Helen didn't know Emma's name, didn't know who she worked for, didn't understand the level of success Emma had helped create. But none of that mattered now. The judgment was already. There for a brief moment, Emma's heart sank. She could feel the sting of unfairness, the quiet shame that society often imposes on those who don't fit a certain mold. But Emma wasn't going to let that define her. She had worked hard to get where she was. She had built a career out of resilience, patience, and dedication. One person's cold gaze wasn't going to change that. She took a deep breath and looked Helen in the eyes, her smile still intact. "No, thank you," she said, her voice steady. "I'll just have a look around." Helen's eyes lingered on Emma for a moment longer before she turned away, as if Emma's presence was an inconvenience. She walked off without another word, and Emma took a step back, her fingers brushing the glass of the display case. She didn't need to look at the handbags. She knew what she had come for, and she knew exactly how to get it. But something about that moment, the way Helen had spoken to her, lingered in her mind. As Emma left the store, she felt the sharp edge of disappointment. Not because she had been denied access to something she couldn't afford or didn't deserve, but because of the way she had been made to feel. It was a quiet shame, one that didn't come from her own actions, but from the actions of others. Outside the store, Emma took a deep breath. The cool London air hit her face, and for a brief moment she closed her eyes. She was used to this feeling of being looked down upon, judged, or underestimated. She had grown up in a small town where people often thought they knew her story without ever asking. She had fought to rise above the labels and expectations placed on her, but it never got easier. Emma took out her phone and sent a quick message to her client, letting her know she had visited the store and would keep looking for the perfect item. There was no need to explain what had happened. It didn't matter. She was there for a job and she would finish it, no matter how much the world tried to make her feel small. But deep down, Emma knew something had shifted in her. It wasn't just about finding a handbag for a campaign. It was about something much bigger: respect. She wasn't asking for more than anyone else. She was simply asking to be seen, to be treated as an equal. But that wasn't always something people were ready to give. As Emma walked away from the store, she couldn't help but think of how many times this had happened to her before. How many people had looked at her with doubt, with judgment, just because she didn't fit their idea of what she should be. And yet, Here she was, still standing, still moving forward. No matter how many people tried to put her in a box, Emma knew one thing: her worth wasn't determined by their gaze. She had already proven it to herself. She had work to do, and nothing at all was going to stop her. Later that afternoon, Helen sat at her desk in the back office, reviewing inventory reports, when the phone rang. The number on the screen was from the head office, and she quickly picked up the receiver, expecting a normal business update. "Hello, Helen," a voice said on the other end. "I'm afraid there's bad news. The campaign with Miss Jordan has been cancelled." Helen froze, her mind raced. Miss Jordan, the pop star, the singer who had been at the top of the charts for years. That campaign was worth nearly £1 billion. It was supposed to be the store's biggest deal yet, the one that would put them on the map and make them famous worldwide. It was the kind of deal every luxury brand dreams of. "Wait, what? Why?" Helen asked, trying to process what she was hearing. Her voice was shaky, her mind still stuck on the word cancelled. She had been working on this campaign for months, talking with designers, organizing the photo shoots, coordinating with the celebrities team. The deal was a goldmine. There was a pause on the other end of the line before the voice spoke again. "We'll follow up," it said, but the coldness in the tone made it clear. This was a final decision. "You'll hear from us soon." Before Helen could say another word, the line went dead. She sat there in stunned silence, the phone still pressed to her ear. Her fingers tightened around it, as if she could somehow change what had just happened. The store's future was tied to that deal. Without it, everything would be different. As she sat there trying to make sense of it, a buzz from her phone interrupted her thoughts. She glanced down and saw a message notification. It was from a social media app. The message wasn't long, but it sent a chill through her. The post was from Miss Jordan herself. There was no explanation, no detailed statement, just a short, simple caption that read, "Sometimes respect costs more than gold." Helen blinked, trying to make sense of it. She opened the post and saw a short video that Miss Jordan had uploaded. It wasn't a rant or an angry message. It was a simple clip of the singer sitting in front of a mirror, her expression calm, though there was a hint of something deeper in her eyes. The video was silent except for the caption. Within minutes, the post began to spread. People were commenting, asking questions, speculating about the meaning of the message. Some suggested that the singer was referring to a business deal. Others thought it had something to do with the fashion industry. But what stood out the most were the questions about the store and the manager. Who was the woman in the shop? Some asked. Why was she treated like that? Others wondered. Helen felt a growing sense of dread as she scrolled through the comments. It didn't take long for people to connect the dots. The video, the caption, the timing, it all pointed to one thing: the luxury store, the manager who had been so cold to Miss Jordan's stylist earlier that day, was being called out publicly. The comments were not just criticizing the store, they were condemning it. People started talking about how Miss Jordan had been disrespected, not just as a celebrity, but as a person. The more Helen read, the more her heart sank. She realized that this wasn't just about a cancelled campaign. It was about something bigger, a deep sense of unfairness, a subtle but painful bias that had been exposed for everyone to see. And the world was taking notice. The phone rang again, pulling Helen out of her thoughts. She answered quickly, her voice tight. "Hello?" she asked, trying to steady herself. "It's me," a voice on the other end said. It was the head office. Again. "We've seen the post. We've seen the reactions." Helen's stomach dropped. What are you saying?" she asked, barely able to catch her breath. "We need to act fast," the voice continued. "We need to issue a public apology, address the situation. The backlash is huge. You need to handle this carefully." Helen sat back in her chair, the weight of the situation pressing down on her. She could feel the walls closing in. This wasn't just about one bad interaction. This was about trust, about respect, and now the whole world was watching. The store was under fire, and there was no way to hide from it. As Helen hung up the phone, she felt completely lost. She thought back to that moment earlier in the day, when she had seen Emma walk into the store. She thought of the coldness in her voice when she had dismissed her. She hadn't known who she was, who she represented. She hadn't realized the power of the quiet woman in front of her, but now it was all too clear. The truth was beginning to surface, and it was more than just a single mistake. It was a reflection of something much deeper, the systemic biases that were still so ingrained in the fashion industry and beyond. The luxury world, so often associated with elegance and beauty, had failed to live up to its own standards. Helen closed her eyes for a moment, wishing she could take it all back, wishing she could undo the damage that had been done. But she couldn't. The damage was done, and now it was time for the world to see what had been hidden in plain sight. The campaign was cancelled. The store's reputation was in jeopardy, and as the comments continued to flood in online, Helen realized that the truth had finally caught up with her, and with the world. The end message of hope. The truth always comes to light, no matter how long it takes. It's never too late to do what's right and change the course of history. As the hours passed, the story about the luxury store and its treatment of Emma began to spread like wildfire. People were talking about it everywhere, on social media, in news articles and on blogs. Comments and opinions flooded in. But with the rise of interest came a flood of questions. People wanted to know the details. They wanted to know the truth. Who was the woman in the store? Why had she been treated this way? And why had the store acted as if she didn't belong? Among the voices asking these questions was a former shop assistant named Lucy. She had worked at the store for a few months before moving on to a different job. She had seen how the management treated certain customers differently, especially those who didn't look rich enough for the store's high-end products. Lucy had quietly watched for weeks, and now she felt she had to speak up. Lucy's post on social media was simple but powerful. "This isn't the first time that manager judged someone based on how they looked," she wrote. "There are others like Emma who have been treated unfairly. I couldn't stay silent anymore." Her words had an immediate impact. As soon as Lucy's post went live, other people who had experienced similar treatment began to come forward. One by one, they shared their stories about being treated differently, watched too closely, or even followed by security just because they didn't fit the image of the typical wealthy customer. Some of them had been told the same thing. Emma had perhaps something more suitable. The store's reputation was falling apart. Each new story added more fuel to the fire. Emma had been the spark, but now, thanks to Lucy and others, the truth about the store's behavior was spreading across the internet. People began to realize that this wasn't just one bad interaction, it was part of a much bigger problem. Emails were leaked from the store's internal system. These emails revealed a disturbing pattern. The store had been monitoring customers more closely if they didn't appear wealthy enough to be there. In some cases, security guards were instructed to follow certain shoppers, watching them as if they were criminals. The emails detailed how the staff had been told to keep an eye on problem customers and to be extra careful around those who didn't fit the typical high-end shopper mold. Helen tried to control the damage. She issued a brief statement to the press, but it only made things worse. "We regret the actions of one of our employees," the statement read. "We take full responsibility for the situation and are looking into it." But it felt empty. People saw it for what it was, a quick attempt to cover up the damage without addressing the real issue. It wasn't just one employee. It was a culture of bias that had taken root in the store. The backlash grew. Protests were organized outside the store. Online petitions were started demanding action. The company's social media accounts were flooded with comments, with people sharing their own stories of being mistreated in luxury stores. There were even calls for a boycott. People were calling for the store to change its policies and apologize properly, but many also believed that real change would only come if the people in charge were held accountable. Despite the growing storm, around her Emma remained silent. She had not spoken out yet. She didn't need to. The video she posted earlier with its simple caption had already spoken for her. It was clear that her message had resonated with so many people. She had done nothing wrong, and she didn't need to add to the noise. The pressure on Helen and the company was immense. She spent hours talking to the head office, trying to fix the situation, but it seemed like the damage couldn't be undone. There was no way to erase the leaks, the stories, or the public outcry. The truth was out there, and people were paying Attention. They weren't going to forget. Helen couldn't escape the feeling that the walls were closing in around her. Her every move was being watched, criticized, and questioned. The store's reputation, once built on exclusivity and luxury, was now tarnished by the stories of how customers had been treated. And in the middle of it all, Emma stood untouched, her silence saying everything that needed to be said. Days passed, but the situation didn't improve. Every time the company made a statement or tried to explain, it felt like they were digging themselves deeper into a hole. Meanwhile, Emma remained out of the spotlight. She didn't respond to requests for interviews or comments. She didn't need to. The world had already seen the truth. As the days turned into weeks, it became clear that this wasn't just a story about a single store. It was a story about the biases that existed in society, in the world of luxury, in every corner, where people were judged based on their appearance. Emma had shone a light on something that had been hidden for too long, and people weren't willing to look away anymore. Helen's position in the store was growing more uncomfortable by the day. The pressure to do something, to fix what had been broken, became overwhelming. But the more she tried to patch things up, the more it became clear that nothing could truly fix what had been done. The store had lost its credibility. And deep down, Helen knew that the company would never recover unless it made real changes from the top down. But Emma wasn't looking to destroy anyone. She wasn't looking for revenge. She had simply wanted to be treated fairly. She had wanted to be seen not just as a shopper, but as a person. And in that quiet, powerful way, she had changed everything. The end message of hope. Sometimes, it's not the loudest voices that make the biggest impact. A simple act of courage can start a change that the world can't ignore. After days of silence, Emma finally agreed to give a quiet interview. It wasn't something she had planned to do, but the growing public attention and the way the story was unfolding made her feel it was time to share her side. She wasn't looking for sympathy or to make things more complicated, but she felt the need to explain her experience. The room was small, quiet. The interviewer sat across from her, a notebook in hand, ready to ask questions. Emma looked calm, her eyes steady, but there was a softness in her voice that seemed to invite understanding. She spoke gently, choosing her words carefully as if each one mattered. "I wasn't upset because she didn't think I had money," Emma began. "I was sad because she couldn't see me as a person." Her words were simple, but powerful. She didn't need to say much, yet everything she felt seemed to be there. She wasn't angry about the judgment based on her appearance, or the assumption that she didn't belong in the luxury store. What had hurt her the most was the way she had been dehumanized. To Helen and others in that store, Emma wasn't a person. They saw only what they wanted to see, an outsider, someone who didn't fit their idea of worthy. The interviewer nodded, sensing the deeper meaning behind Emma's words. He paused before asking, "Can you tell us more about that day? Why were you there?" Emma thought for a moment, her eyes looking distant, as if she were recalling the past. "That day I was looking for items to include in a campaign about equality and beauty. I wasn't there for myself. I was there for something bigger than just clothes or handbags." She shifted slightly in her seat, her voice growing a little more passionate. "I wanted to show that style has no color, that beauty is for everyone, no matter who you are or where you come from." She took a deep breath as if the weight of the words she had spoken had settled in. "I've worked hard to get where I am, and now I help young black artists build their careers, manage their money, and stay grounded. I've seen the struggle, the barriers. I've lived it. But I'm here to help them break those barriers, to show them that they deserve success, that they are worthy." That day in the store, it wasn't just about me, it was about the bigger picture. It was about showing the world that we all deserve to be seen for who we are, not just for the way we look. The room grew silent. The interviewer didn't say anything for a moment, as if letting her words sink in. Emma's story wasn't just about one incident. It was about a lifetime of experiences, of fighting for respect, for acknowledgement, and for the right to stand on equal ground. The truth of what she had said hung in the air, touching everyone in the room. It was clear that Emma wasn't just speaking for herself. She was speaking for everyone who had ever felt overlooked, misunderstood, or judged unfairly. Her voice was calm, but it carried the weight of all those years of hard work, of overcoming obstacles, of helping others. Emma wasn't just a business manager for a famous artist. She was a bridge for young people like her, people who had dreams but needed someone to show them that they were possible. She wasn't just helping her client, she was helping an entire generation. I've seen people like me fight every day to make their mark, Emma continued, her eyes now filled with determination. They don't always have the same opportunities. They don't always get the same chances. But they have talent, and they have heart. That's why I do what I do, to level the playing field, to help them find their voice and their place in the world. Her words were powerful, and the way she spoke made it clear that she had a vision. She wasn't asking for special treatment. She was asking for fairness, for equality, for a world where everyone could be seen for who they truly were, not just by the way they looked or where they came from. The interviewer could see that Emma wasn't just telling her story, she was starting a conversation. A conversation about respect, equality, and the importance of seeing people for who they truly were, beyond appearances. She wasn't looking for pity or sympathy. She was simply asking for understanding. "I didn't want to fight," Emma said, her tone softening. "I just wanted to be treated with respect. I wanted to be seen as a person, not just as someone who didn't belong. And I wanted to show the world that style has no color, that beauty isn't something you can measure by wealth or skin tone. It's about what's inside." Her message was clear. The world was full of bias and unfairness, but the only way to change it was through understanding and empathy, through seeing people for who they truly were, and treating them with dignity, regardless of their background or appearance. The interviewer nodded, clearly moved by her words. He didn't need to ask any more questions. Emma had already given him everything he needed to understand. Her message was one that would stay with him long after the interview ended. It wasn't just a story, it was a call for change. The room remained quiet for a moment as Emma finished speaking. Her calm demeanor, her quiet strength spoke volumes. She had said all that needed to be said. She wasn't angry or bitter. She was simply asking for respect, for fairness, for equality. As the interview came to a close, the interviewer thanked her. Emma smiled gently, nodding as she stood up. She hadn't said much, but in those few words she had said everything. The world would hear her now and they wouldn't forget. The end. Message of hope. Sometimes the quietest voices carry the most powerful messages. The truth, no matter how softly spoken, can change the world. After everything that had happened, Emma didn't dwell on the past. She wasn't interested in revenge or staying stuck in anger. She was a woman with a vision, and now that vision was starting to take shape. It all started when Miss Jordan, the famous singer, reached out to Emma after everything went public. They had already worked together before, and Miss Jordan knew Emma's passion for change. Emma had always wanted to create something bigger than herself, something that could inspire people and make a difference. Now was the time. They decided to start their own fashion brand. But this wasn't going to be like any other brand. Emma and Miss Jordan wanted to build a brand that focused on kindness, fairness, and dignity. They wanted to show the world that fashion could be more than just clothes. It could be a statement of who we are, a reflection of respect and equality. Their mission was simple: to prove that beauty wasn't about how much money you had or where you came from. It was about the heart, the soul, and the way you carried yourself. They launched their first campaign, and it didn't take long for it to go viral. The response was overwhelming. The models in their campaign weren't just the usual runway stars. They came from all walks of life. There were people from small towns, big cities, and everywhere in between. Some were older, some were younger. Some were from different countries, some from different cultures. But all of them had one thing in common: they were proud of who they were. They were the real faces of the world, not the idealized, polished images that often graced fashion magazines. Emma was now the creative director of the brand, a role she had earned through years of hard work, resilience, and an unshakable belief in her vision. She had once been the girl who was overlooked, dismissed, and judged by her appearance. But now she was the one who was building something new, something that didn't just sell clothes. It sold a message of inclusion, of respect, and of seeing people for who they truly were. The brand quickly gained attention, not just for its beautiful designs, but for the message it carried. People felt connected to it. They saw themselves in the models, in the stories, and in the mission. It wasn't just a brand, it was a movement. Emma had built something that people believed in. Meanwhile, the luxury store that had shamed Emma seemed to crumble under the weight of its past. Helen, the manager, quietly left her position. There were no grand speeches, no public apologies. She just slipped away, leaving behind the mess she had created. It was almost as if she wanted to forget the whole thing had ever happened. But the world didn't forget. Emma didn't focus on Helen. She had moved on. She had her own path to follow now, and she was determined to stay true to it. The lessons she had learned from that painful day in the store were what fueled her. The kindness she had always believed in was now at the heart of everything she did. In her first public speech as creative director of the brand, Emma stood tall in front of a crowd of people who had once doubted her. Her words were simple but powerful. "We don't need to fight to be seen," she said, her voice steady and strong. "We just need to keep showing up again and again until the world sees clearly." Her words were a reminder to everyone that change didn't come from fighting or forcing it. Change came from consistency, from showing up every day with kindness and respect, and from being who you truly were. Emma had done that. She had shown up even when the world tried to shut her down, and now she was leading a movement that was changing the way people saw each other. The brand grew, and with it, Emma's influence. She became a symbol of strength and resilience, but more than that, she became a symbol of the power of kindness. She showed people that there was more to life than fitting into a mold. There was power in being yourself, in embracing who you were, and in standing up for what was right. Helen may have left the store, but Emma's journey was just beginning. She had built something real, something lasting, and with every step she took, she continued to inspire others to do the same. Emma's story wasn't just about a fight for equality. It was about showing up every day, no matter how difficult it might seem, and keeping the faith in who you were. It was about building something good, something that could change the world for the better. And in the end, that's what she did. The end. Message of hope. Change doesn't come from the loudest voices or the biggest fights. It comes from showing up, being yourself, and believing in the power of kindness and respect.